Welcome everyone. I'm Barbara Beckert with Disability Rights Wisconsin, and on behalf of the Wisconsin Disability Vote Coalition, thank you for joining us for today's press briefing about disability rights and the November 8th election. Our coalition is committed to ensuring that people with disabilities are registered to vote, cast a ballot, and understand and assert their rights. We include people with disabilities in over 40 agencies around the state, and our coalition is coordinated by DRW and the Wisconsin Board for People with Developmental Disabilities. A few logistics: please mute to keep background noise down. ASL interpreters are available. If you need an interpreter and need to multi-pin, please message me in the chat. We will hear from our speakers and then open it up to questions from members of the media. Jenny and I will also monitor the chat for questions. Resources are also provided on our website, and I'm going to put the link in the chat here, and we'll send that out to you as well in a follow-up email. So to jump right in now, this has been a very confusing year for many voters with disabilities. The voting process for absentee voters has changed with every one of the 4 elections this year. While voters received information from clerks and heard a lot from the media about restrictions, elimination of drop boxes, and that only a voter may mail or return their ballot, there hasn't always been as much information shared about important voter rights and accommodations, including the right to assistance with voting. We're hearing that a lot of voters are confused, so we're really glad you're here today to help us get the word out. We want to be sure that voters with disabilities know their rights and that election officials protect and ensure these rights, which are guaranteed by federal and state law. Today, you will hear directly from voters with disabilities about rights and resources that we hope members of the press can lift up to educate and inform members of the public. First message: we encourage voters to plan ahead. One area where planning may be needed is photo ID. Wisconsin has a very restrictive photo ID law. The most common form is a driver's license. However, because so many people with disabilities are non-drivers, they don't have a driver's license. While photo ID for voting is available, getting that photo ID can be a challenge because people are non-drivers. The only place to get a photo ID is the Department of Motor Vehicles. Hours are limited, and it can take up to an hour in rural areas to get to a DMV office. So a few resources we want to highlight. We work closely with Vote Riders. They are a great resource to help people to get photo ID. Also, if people don't have the documents needed, a birth certificate, for example, not everyone has that handy, they still can get a temporary ID for voting. So if you don't have those documents, don't give up on getting photo ID. Finally, in the week leading up to the election, DMV will have extended hours at many locations. This is helpful because many people aren't able to get to DMV during the workday or on the weekend. But this will give people a little bit more flexibility with accessing DMV services. That information is on their website. Photo ID is required for voting with a few exceptions, and I'll just run through those. Voters in special care facilities, such as nursing homes, the signature of special voting deputies on the absentee ballot satisfies the photo ID requirement. Confidential electors are exempt. These are usually people who have been a victim of domestic violence. Active military and permanent overseas voters are also exempt, and indefinitely confined voters. This is an area that's important for many people with disabilities. Indefinitely confined voters certify that they are confined due to age, illness, infirmity, or disability and want to receive absentee ballots for every election until they fail to return a ballot or have a change in status. Indefinitely confined voters are not required to provide a photo ID. Instead, they prove their identity by providing proof of residence when registering to vote, and their witness also confirms their identity. So photo ID, first part of making your plan to vote. Now I'm going to turn it over to the first of our speakers of voters with disabilities and disability advocates, who will share some of the other important rights and accommodations. I'd like to turn it over now to Martha Chambers. Martha, are you ready to take the baton?
I am ready. First of all, I'd like to apologize for being off screen today. It's been a difficult morning for me. I will let you know in a minute why that is. Hello, my name is Martha Chambers. I was injured in a horseback riding accident nearly 28 years ago, and I am paralyzed from my neck down, unable to use my arms or legs, which for this very reason, absentee voting is very important to me. Because of various barriers that can happen as I am preparing to vote. Just between yesterday and today, an issue came up with my health that made it impossible for me to be on camera. And here's a prime example of why I need absentee voting. If I would have had to go to vote today, I would not have been able to. So voting by absentee ballot for me and many people like myself is very important. And I want to back up just a little to let you know that I'm a consultant working closely with disability rights on voting rights, as well as a member of the Disability Vote Coalition. I forgot to mention that. And today I would like to share some of the things that someone with a disability have a right for assistance as a part of the voting process. Since April, there have been several changes with the absentee voting, what was allowed, barriers, when they were changed, who could assist with the ballot, return assistance, and so on. So today I would like to clarify absentee voting. Voters with a disability have the right to assistance with any part of the voting process. The right is protected by federal law as confirmed by a federal court order in August of 2022. There was the Kerry versus Wisconsin Election Commission lawsuit, which I was a part of, and that was very important to me to represent myself and many people with disabilities to be sure that the right to vote by absentee with return assistance was okay to do. And that was confirmed, as I said, by the federal court in August. Okay, voters with a disability may request assistance with mailing or delivering their ballot or with any part of the voting process from anyone who is not their employer or a representative of their labor union. We recommend the voters let their person who's assisting them know. They may be asked to confirm that they are returning a ballot. For a person with a disability, the voter and assister should not ever have to fill out any forms or provide proof of a disability. So no one can ask me what my disability is, or the assister who is with me, they should not have to answer any of those questions. And however, as indicated in the Wisconsin Election Commission guidance, election officials may ask a few questions of the assister, and these questions are listed in the guidance document. If a voter needs help marking the ballot, they may have a person of their choice assist them. That person does not need to be qualified to vote, which is if they need, okay, excuse me, if voting at their polling place, the voter may bring someone with them or request assistance from a poll worker. Some other changes for people voting by absentee would be to drop boxes. The drop boxes are no longer allowed in Wisconsin due to a court ruling. Voters should return their ballot as soon as possible and allow at least a week for the mail. Other than that, the clerks are no longer allowed to add missing or incomplete information on an envelope. So be sure when you fill out your ballot that the witness fills in all of the details that they need. They sign it, they have their address complete because of that very fact. I don't think I missed anything. That would be all for me. Thanks for listening and having me on this.
Yeah, Martha, thank you so much for that important information and for all of your advocacy for voting rights in Wisconsin. You've really made a difference. You know, as you said, that witness information must be complete or the voters' absentee ballot could be returned to them and their vote may not count. So really important new information for this election. I'm going to turn it over now to our next speaker, Denise Jess.
Good morning. Thanks, Barbara. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I am Denise Jess. I'm the Executive Director of the Wisconsin Council of the Blind and Visually Impaired, and also a member of the Wisconsin Disability Vote Coalition. I am a voter who is legally blind and have significant vision loss since birth. Today, I want to kick us off by talking a little bit about accessibility in the polling place. Under both Wisconsin law and the federal Help America Vote Act, all polling places are required to have accessible voting equipment ready for voters, plugged in, turned on, programmed, tested when the polls open and on election day. And that equipment is really critical for voters with blindness and other disabilities that prohibit us from being able to mark the standard print ballot privately and independently. It uses screen reader technology and a tactile marking device and a touch screen in order to be able to mark the ballot, and then the ballot is printed and put into the tabulator. When that equipment is set up, it is critical that it is set in a way that anyone using a wheelchair is able to access the controls. And it's also critical that that tactile marking device and the headphones be accessible so that those of us needing the auditory component are able to use the equipment. That equipment is not segregated only for the use of people with disabilities. And I really want to emphasize that point. That equipment is in the polling place and may be used by any voter on election day who chooses to use it. And we really want to encourage any and all voters to use it, both to build an understanding of the equipment and its usage, and also to help lift up the importance and the value of that equipment, particularly for voters with disabilities, and to really help showcase it and shine the light on it. In addition to the accessible voting equipment, voters with disabilities have the right to other accommodations, and some of these include access to a signature guide for signing the poll book and any other documents, and access to a magnifier. A voter may be asked to state their name and address by a poll worker before they're able to be handed their ballot. And if a voter does not have the ability to verbally state their name and address, they have the right to accommodation here as well under Wisconsin state law. They can ask an assister, again, of their choosing, or a poll worker to state the name and address as it shows on the ID or from a printed document that the elector brings with them. Shifting gears a little bit, I want to speak to the importance of accessible absentee voting. I really appreciate Martha's comments about being able to cast the ballot and the importance of being able to do that through mail voting and paper ballot. And in Wisconsin, we do not have an accessible absentee ballot. So other states over the last number of years have been adopting an option in which voters can receive the ballot and it can interface with access technology so that we can be able to vote the ballot privately and independently. For voters with vision loss and other print-related and physical disabilities, reading and marking a paper ballot is either very difficult or, in my case, it's impossible. And so we sacrifice our ability to vote privately and independently if we choose to vote absentee or need to vote absentee. Wisconsin does not have this provision. It could be amended by changing state statute so that we would be doing best practice by having an accessible and ADA compliant ballot for mail voting. During 2020, we are very aware that several states had litigation which ended in positive changes for this balloting option to become available. And it is our hope and ask that Wisconsin follows suit to increase the access to all voters who wish to vote absentee and to avoid costly litigation. So I'm going to turn it back to you, Barbara, to make the transition to our next speaker. Thanks so much.
Denise, thank you for sharing those important points about accessibility and the requirements in both federal and state law. I'm going to turn it over now to Kyle Kleist, who will continue to talk about accessibility at our polling places. Kyle, we can't hear you. Sorry.
There, can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Yes, sorry. Kyle Kleist, Executive Director at the Center for Independent Living for Western Wisconsin. Also a member of the Wisconsin Disability Vote Coalition and a person with a disability that uses a wheelchair and a voter. So I wanted to talk about some of the accessibility issues at polling places. Now, need to remind folks that under federal law and state law, all of our polling places need to be fully accessible to older adults and people with disabilities. So this includes adequate and proper parking, and then both exterior and interior pathways that are level and free of obstructions. And then most importantly, having that accessible voting area. And as Denise had pointed to, having people use that accessible voting machine. We've included a resource in the packet on the election day accessibility checklist that is provided to poll workers. Other accommodations that might come up for persons that choose to vote in person is having long lines. So persons with mobility issues or other disabling conditions that could prevent them from standing a long line for a long period of time can request to have a chair, or many times poll workers can move them up in the line so that they're not having to stand for a long period of time. And then along the lines of accessibility, the Wisconsin Election Commission Polling Place Accessibility Audit Program, it's an important safeguard to identify and address the accessibility issues or concerns that come up. So on election day, auditors will be going out and visiting the polling places across Wisconsin. And the process generally takes up to 20 to 60 minutes. And auditors make sure that they are not interrupting the process at the voting place. And then what they do is they generate documentation then that goes to the election commission. And then the election commission lets the clerks know if there are issues and concerns of accessibility at their polling place. I'm happy to say that this year, all of the 8 independent living centers in Wisconsin will be participating in conducting the polling place audits. So a great way of identifying any accessibility issues that might be at polling places. Another thing I wanted to talk about was curbside voting. So curbside voting is required by state statute for any voter who cannot enter the polling place due to their disability. So what will happen is 2 poll workers will bring out the ballot for the person, so they're able to conduct voting from their vehicle or at the polling place entrance. And if a person does choose to curbside vote, they are not required to sign the poll list. Instead, the poll worker can write exempt by order of the inspector in the signature space. So curbside voting varies by different polling place. So we encourage all people to reach out to your clerk in advance to find out how curbside voting is handled at your election site, and what you might need to do, call ahead or call at the time when you go to vote, just to make sure that you're able to vote from your vehicle if necessary. And finally, I wanted to talk about transportation. Because there are so many people with disabilities that are non-drivers in Wisconsin, transportation polling is often a challenge. This is especially true in rural areas where there is limited access to transportation services. So as a result, many individuals with disabilities choose to vote absentee, but many others like myself enjoy that in-person voting experience. And so for voters with disabilities who need transportation to the polling place, the Disability Vote Coalition has compiled a list of providers who can offer transportation for voting. Most require advance, so go to the Disability Vote Coalition website. There's also the link in the resource packet provided for those programs and providers that do provide transportation on November 8th. So try to contact them. I would at least 48 to 72 hours ahead of time to schedule a ride, and we'd be happy to assist folks. Here at our center, we have the New Freedom program that will provide free transportation for voting in our 10 county service area. So thank you, and I will turn it back over to Barbara.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kyle, again, for pointing out that federal and state law have a lot of protections in them, but often people with disabilities and sometimes poll workers and election officials aren't aware of these rights. So I appreciate the chance to highlight those. I'm going to talk about another area where there's been confusion and some misleading information, and that is guardianship in voting rights. In Wisconsin, a person under guardianship retains the right to vote unless the court expressly removes that right. We find often that people under guardianship aren't sure if they have the right to vote. In that case, we would advise them to look at their guardianship papers. There's a form called a determination and order on petition for guardianship due to incompetency, bit of a mouthful, and that will indicate whether or not the person has retained the right to vote. If a box will be checked, if the right has been removed. We also want to reinforce that incompetency for voting purposes can only be determined by a judge. Family members, medical staff, caretakers cannot make that determination and may not take away the right to vote. In addition, the activation of a person's power of attorney for health care should not be allowed to prevent that person from registering to vote or voting unless the person has lost the right to vote through a court proceeding. A medical diagnosis does not disqualify a person from voting. The only way to bar a person from voting due to allegations of incompetency is for a court to decide. If someone does lose the right to vote due to guardianship, they have the right to petition the court to restore that vote. Disability Rights Wisconsin has provided some resources that walk people through that process, and I'm going to put that in the chat. And in addition, people should feel free to contact our voter hotline. We welcome the opportunity to hear from people who want to learn more about this process and to assist them with information about how to restore the right to vote. Another area that we receive a lot of questions about is the voting rights of people who live in care facilities, such as a nursing home or group home. So first and foremost, residents in care facilities have the same right to vote as any other citizen unless they have lost that right. In fact, voting is a resident rights issue. The Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, which provides funding to many nursing homes and other care facilities, states that nursing homes should have a plan to ensure residents can exercise their right to vote, whether in person, by mail, absentee, or other authorized process. If a state has specific programs to enable nursing home residents to vote, the facility should coordinate with those programs. In Wisconsin, our special voting deputy program conducts absentee voting in nursing homes and other qualified facilities. SVDs are supposed to visit a facility 2 times to conduct in-person absentee voting. So that's going on right now. They may or may not be able to assist with voter registration. So for that reason, it's important to note that residents may need assistance with registering to vote and with requesting an absentee ballot. To be eligible for the SVD program, a facility must have at least 5 residents who are registered to vote and at least 1 absentee request on file. We do have in our resource pack a link to information about the SVD program, and also an excellent guide prepared by the American Bar Association about assisting cognitively impaired individuals with voting. Really gives some helpful guidance on how to provide assistance in those situations, and we always share it with care facility staff. So I'm going to turn it over now to my partner in this coalition, Jenny Newgart.
Thanks, Barbara. Hi, I'm Jenny. I am a voter with physical disability. I'm a determined advocate for voting rights and the co-lead of the Disability Coalition. So today you've heard about the changes in election law and processes and many of the accommodations that are important to voters with disability. We continue to hear that voters are confused because of the frequent changes that have occurred this year, and many are not aware of their right to accommodations. Poll workers and elected officials may offer disability accommodations and the requirements in state and federal law. We hope you can include the information today in your voter guides and stories. We're providing you with a resource list and voter guide suggestions on our website, and those links have just been put in the chat. So we appreciate your attention to this issue today. We would like to open it up for questions. You can either put it in the chat or you could raise your hand or just I'm not seeing anything come in. I was waiting a little bit on the chat question. I guess we can wrap it up. You have our,
Well, why don't we wait just a minute, Jenny? Maybe we
Okay.
can share some of the frequently asked questions that we hear. So I know one question that we sometimes get is, what can people use for a proof of residence document? Because the most common proof of residence document is required to register to vote. And often people who are calling us for assistance don't have a driver's license with an address on it that they can use for that purpose. So we really try and work with people around that. I recently got a call from a high school teacher who was helping a student with a disability. He didn't have a driver's license. He didn't have a photo ID yet. She was hoping to help him get that. He didn't have a bank statement or a utility bill. So in his case, we were able to work with him and he could actually use his report card, which had his address on it. So for that young man with a disability, he was able to go ahead and register to vote because we could assist him with finding that proof of residence. So I know that that can be a barrier for people to vote. So just wanted to note that there are a lot of innovative ways to do that, and people should feel free to call us at the DRW voter hotline, which is 844-347-8683. Just a little commercial because we know that there are so many questions out there. So Kyle, Denise, Martha, any frequently asked questions that you wanted to share?
No, Barbara, this is Kyle. The only thing I wanted to throw in is we do get questions from folks that use our New Freedom volunteer driver program about if we provide rides on to the polls, and yes, we do. So I just wanted to get out that. And if there's any persons with disabilities that need assistance in getting identification or with using their identification to get registered, all of the 8 independent living centers in Wisconsin are able to assist you. Just reach out to your local independent living center and they would be happy to help you out.
Thank you, Kyle. That's a really important point. Looks like Denise has a comment.
I do, thank you. Something we hear from our constituency quite a bit is concern about who can assist. And I know we covered that today, and I want to emphasize again that the assister is anyone of the voters choosing. So, your spouse, a caregiver, a poll worker can assist in the voting process. Frequently, we have heard from voters that poll workers tell them they cannot assist. That is incorrect. So the only people who cannot assist a voter with disabilities are that voter's employer and or union representative. So please use the assister that you feel most safe and confident in asking to help vote.
Those are great points, Denise. The one other restriction I've heard is someone who is a candidate on the ballot cannot
Exactly.
assist a voter, but I can't emphasize how important this is. I mean, we have heard from voters who were told at the polling place they could not have assistance and they were humiliated and upset, and they ended up not voting and leaving as a result of that. So we appreciate the help of media to get the record straight so people understand their rights, and those rights are protected by state and federal law. Which brings up one more important thing. For voters who do have an experience like that, whose rights are violated in some way, please follow up. First of all, we are available at the DRW voter hotline. You can give us a call, but it's important to get a complaint on the record. So the Wisconsin Election Commission has a process for making a complaint that is relatively easy to do. So that's one option, or you can give them a phone call, but getting something in writing is always a good idea. And another option, if there's a really serious concern, is the United States Department of Justice also is eager to hear from voters, and you can make a complaint to the DOJ if needed, if you experience disability-related discrimination or denial of your rights. And the US Department of Justice actually did weigh in the Kerry v. Weck state to note that Wisconsin was not following federal law that protects the rights of people with disabilities, and that was not acceptable. And I think that that made a difference in ensuring that we got a court order from Judge Peterson that told Wisconsin election officials that those rights must be protected and upheld. Great. Any other comments from our panel members or from others in attendance before we wrap things up? Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that members of the media will find the resources that we provided on our website helpful, and please follow up with us if you have any additional questions. Thank you very much for joining us today, and special thanks to the members of our panel. I'll just stick around a little bit longer in case there are any other comments or questions.